Okay, shall we start? Yes. Good evening. Online, good evening. Hope it is audible, visible. Now today we'll be discussing about which subject? It is geography. Now, whenever we are studying about any subject as such, now which all things we need to discuss? Now, if you are considering it as our geography, now before studying about any subject, which all things we need to discuss here? First, now the first one, whenever we are discussing about any subject as such, we need to know about three things here. The first and the foremost one we call it as, what is geography? First one, you have to know this, yes or no? First one. And the second one we call it as, why we need to study this subject? Why we need to study this subject? And the third one we call it as, how to study this? Yes or no? We'll study this one by one. Now, don't you think before studying about any subject, we need to know about the three important aspects? One we call it as what? One we call it as what? And the second one, why? And the third one we call it as how to study this. Now, if we are studying about geography, now what is geography? It is first one. What is geography? The first one, what is geography? It's okay. It is first one, what is geography? The first one, it is geography means it is derived from two important words. One we call it as the geo, and the second one we call it as what? Graphy. Now, what is geo means? Online, what is geo? And the second one, what do you mean by graphy? First, what is geo and what do you mean by graphy? First, it is geo means what? Geo means earth. Geo means we call it as the earth. And the graphy means what? The graphy means we call it as, the study. In a simpler manner, can I say, geography means it's a branch of what? It is a science or a social science. It's okay, what is it, science or is it a social science? In answer to me, it is a social science. It's a branch of, we call it as, it's a branch of what? It's a social science which deals with respect to what? Which deals with respect to the study about what? Study about earth. It's a branch of social science which deals with respect to the study about our earth. We call it as geography. Yes or no? Is the first part clear? Now sir, which all things will be discussing as a part of this, as a part of our, we call it as our geography, as a part of our geography, which all things will be discussing here? Now, under our geography, which all things we will be discussing here? The first one is it clear? First one? The first one, it was the geo. Now I'll open the live also. Okay, Online, yes, okay. The first one, yes, the good evening, the Samrin, good evening, yes. Okay, this is our first one. The first one, is it clear? It's a branch of social science which majorly deals with respect to what? Which majorly deals with respect to the study about earth. Now my question here is, under earth, under the concept of earth, which all things we will be discussing here? Which all things we will be discussing from our, it is exam perspective, from our UPSC exam, that is the UPSC Prelims as well as UPSC Mains, which all things we will be discussing as a part of our earth? First, which all things? Now, is it the interior of the earth, within the earth, or outside the earth, or both? It is both. Now, within the earth we call it as what? It is interior of the earth, yes or no? Now, and the outside part of the study about earth we call it as? It is exterior, yes or no? Now with respect to our geography, it is majorly we'll be studying about the earth and we call it as related concepts we will be studying as a part of what? As a part of our geography. Yes or no? The first one, geography, means it's a branch of social science which majorly deals with respect to what? It is earth. First one done. And the second one, the concept of geography has it derived from where? The concept of it as we call it as the geography has been taken up from where? First, the concept of geography has derived from, we call it as, it has derived from a Greek word. It has been derived from a Greek word. It is geo, means we call it as earth, and graphy means we call it as study. Now sir, which all things will be studying as a part of the earth, and which all things will be studying as a part of what? As a part of, we call it as the related aspects. Now, which all things will be studying here? Now while studying about the earth part, we'll be studying about, as you guys said, we'll be studying about what? We'll be studying about interior. We'll be studying about interior. And the second one, we'll also be studying about what? We'll also be studying about the exterior concepts. We'll be studying about the exterior, the concepts. Yes or no? Now sir, within this interior, which all things we'll be studying here? With respect to the exterior part, which all things we will be studying here? First, everyone should be active in my class. Even if it is wrong also, it's okay. Online, you guys also, you can answer. I'm seeing the chats also. Fast. Begin. It is exactly, it is within our interior. We will be studying about what? We will be studying about, we call it as the interior part of the earth. Nothing that. This is our earth. Yes or no? This is our earth. Yes or no? Now, whatever the concept we'll be studying below the earth, we call it as what? Fast. Below the earth, we call it as interior. We call it as interior. Yes or no? And whatever the concepts related to earth, if we are studying related to the outside, we call it as what? We call it as exterior. Yes or no? This is our second one. Now sir, what is interior and what are the different dimensions we will be studying here? Now what all dimensions we'll be studying here? First one, interior is in a simpler manner. Can I say it is all the aspects below the earth or below the earth's surface? If this is our earth, don't you think all the aspects related, it is related to it is below the earth, we call it as interior? Yes or no? And the second one, now whatever the aspects which are above what? Above the surface, we call it as what? We call it as exterior of the earth. Yes or no? This is the first one. Second one, sir, while studying about interior of the earth, we will be studying about what? We'll be studying about the different concentric layers. The different concentric layers. The deepest concentric layer, we call it as what? The deepest concentric layer, we call it as what? It is bibutyric. It is core. And the second one? The middle layer, we call it as what? The middle layer, we call it as the mantle. The middle layer, we call it as mantle. The uppermost part of it is interior, we call it as what? The crust. Yes or no? Online, is it clear or what? Okay, Alva. The first one we call it as the core part, and the second one we call it as mantle, and the third one we call it as the uppermost part of the interior of the earth, we call it as what? Crust. Now recently there was a current affairs related to this interior also. Now I'll be discussing both the static as well as current affairs, and this course will be both for prelims as well as mains. Now end-to-end concepts, it's my duty, I'll be doing all the things. Both from the prelims part, it is I'll be covering end-to-end questions, and the second one we call it as the mains also, It is every day I'll be teaching you how to write the mains answer writing also. Okay, Alva. Each and everything, it's my duty. Geography, it's my duty. I'll be covering all the things. Today it's about strategy session. We'll discuss about 3 important things. One, we call it as what is geography, how we need to study about geography, and the third one we call it as it is from where all to study and how to organize. We'll see all the aspects. Now sir, recently there was a current affairs. The recent one we call it as Arizona University. It is which university? It is Arizona University has recently identified a new layer, and that new layer we call it as what? That new layer we call it as E prime. It's not Amazon Prime, rather we call it as what? A new layer called as it is E prime layer has been identified by which university? It is Arizona University. Yes or no? Now majorly understand here. Now majorly while discussing about the major aspects, it is about our geography. We will be discussing about our 2 important things here. One, as I already said, we'll be studying about what? Interior. Now with respect to interior, we will be studying about the first one, we call it as the layers of earth. Now what are the different layers of earth? It is the crust, the mantle and the core, or the core, mantle and the crust. Anyways, it's fine. It's the first one, we call it as the layers. We have how many layers? Majorly we call it as core, mantle as well as what? The crust. Is our first one. And the second one we will be discussing about the concepts called as about the concept of what? The rocks. Now what do you mean by the rocks and what do you mean by minerals? First, what is minerals and what is rocks? Exactly. It is naturally occurring substance, we call it as what? The minerals. The naturally occurring substance, we call it as minerals. Now the group of minerals, we call it as what? We call it as rock. Or as simple as that, or in a simpler manner, we call it as aggregation. Now what is aggregation, Andren? Now aggregation means it's a group of the minerals, we call it as what? Group of minerals, we call it as the rocks. Group of minerals, we call it as what? The rocks. Yes or no? Now what are the rocks do we have with respect to the earth? It is, we have 3 types of rocks. The first one we call it as, we have 3 types of rocks. One we call it as the parent rock called as which rock? Igneous rock. It is not igneous, it is igneous rock. And the second one we call it as what? Second one we call it as sedimentary rock. We will discuss all the things, but this class is about an introductory as well as the strategy session. Yes or no? And firstly, to understand you guys, in the same manner you will be understanding me. Yes or no? If the bonding is good, we'll go with respect to geography. Yes or no? This is majorly as not as a strategy or not as an introductory session, rather to understand about it is each other's, so that we can discuss about the complete, we call it as geography. It is both from our prelims as well as from the mains perspective. Yes or no? Majorly this part, it is the igneous we'll be discussing. Second one we call it as sedimentary rock, and the third one we call it as which one? It is metamorphic rock. Yes, for each and everything, we will be discussing based on, we call it as blueprinting. Based on blueprinting, first we'll be discussing about the layers, second we'll be discussing about the rocks, and the under rocks we'll be discussing about igneous rock, the sedimentary rock, the metamorphic rock. We'll be discussing about the rock cycle. We'll be discussing about the minerals part. All these things we'll be discussing under, we call it as under where? Under the interior of the earth. Under the interior of the earth. Now along with these things, we will be discussing about the different sources of interior of the earth. Now can we reach the interior part of the earth? Can we reach? Can we go below the earth? Now we can go, but maximum we can go is up till maybe some 5 kilometers or 6 kilometers. But after that the temperature as well as density is so intense that it is humans cannot enter. Humans cannot enter. Yes or no? The humans cannot enter. Now we'll be studying about Under this we'll be studying about, we call it as the sources of what? The sources of interior of the earth also. Under this we'll be studying about our earthquakes. We'll be studying about, we call it as volcanoes. We will be studying about, we call it as the landslides. We will be studying about a concept of weathering. All those aspects related to what? The interior, boss. Yes or no? Hope you're getting the complete idea about geography. The first one we call it as interior. And second one, sir, in the same manner, we call it as, in the same manner, what? It is in the same manner. Okay, wrong. Okay, in the same manner we call it as, what do you mean by exterior? What do you mean by exterior? It is, first one, we need to know about what is exterior of the earth. Now, what is the exterior of the earth means? Now, exterior of the earth means studying about what? Being fast. What is exterior? It is the outside. Now, studying about the surface of the earth. Studying about what? Surface of the earth. We call it as what? We call it as the exterior part. Now, under exterior, we will be studying about which all aspects, boss? First, which all aspects we'll be studying here? Now, under this, we will be studying about 3 to 4 important concepts. Now, major it is 3. Now, sir, which is that? Now, under our exterior of the earth, we have 3 important concepts here. One, we call it as studying about lithosphere. The first one we call it as, we will be studying about an aspect called as studying about we call it as the lithosphere, first one. And the second one, we will be studying about an aspect called as hydro. And the third one, we call it as, or the last one, it is atmosphere. Now, sir, all this are fine. Now, what is litho, what is hydro, and what is atmo? First. Exactly. It is perfect. Okay, now with respect to this, now the first one we call it as litho, and the second one we call it as sphere. Now, sir, what do you mean by litho and what do you mean by sphere? Beginning. What is litho and what is sphere? Now, I said litho means the land. What is sphere means? First, what is litho and what is sphere? Now, first one we call it as, the litho means we call it as land. Litho means we call it as land, and sphere means region. Litho means land, and the sphere means we call it as region. A region which is present on the land, we call it as lithosphere. Now, while studying about lithosphere or the land region, we will be studying about which all related aspects. Which all related aspects we will be studying while studying about the land-based region. Online as well as offline, be cautious. First, yes, it is, we will be studying about majorly, we'll be studying about, it is land as well as the region. The litho is nothing but land. Be cautious here. From now on, as soon as I say litho, now what is litho? Land. Sphere means it's a region. It's a region. Now, while studying about the land region, which all things we'll be discussing here. Now, what is present about the land? It is, first one is mountain, perfect. Second, it is vegetation, perfect, yes. Next, big name. It is, we will be studying about, we call it as, the first one we call it as the physical aspects. Understand my word here. First, we will be studying about the physical aspects of land. Now, what do you mean by the physical aspects of land? What do you mean by the physical aspects of land? First, Now under the physical aspects of land, we will be studying about, we call it as the mountains. Now can you give some examples of mountains which we can see in our India? It is first one is Himalayas, second one is our Western Ghats, Himalayas, the Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats. Yes or no? Don't you think we'll be studying under the physical aspects? Yes or no, boss? Yes or no? Yes. Second one, we will be studying about deserts. We will be studying about deserts. Now while discussing about deserts, now which all types of deserts we'll see? We will talk about cold deserts. We will talk about hot deserts. Now can you give some examples of the cold deserts as well as hot deserts of the world or from India? Online fast. It is Thar Desert, the largest desert, we call it a Sahara Desert, it's in Africa. Now we'll see all those things via Atlas. I won't be randomly discussing the theory concept, rather we'll be experiencing our geography. Now we can imagine what is the climatic conditions of Sahara. We'll be going for some visualization also. At the same time, via Atlas also we'll be discussing this geography part. Yes or no? This is, we call it as, the second one we call it as deserts. Now under deserts we will be discussing about, we call it as the cold deserts as well as what? The hot deserts. Now sir, under cold deserts, can I give some examples like, we call it as Ladakh Desert of India, Gobi Desert of, we call it as Mongolia or China. We'll see. It's just, I'm giving you a hint. It is second one, hot deserts. Now hot deserts which includes our Thar deserts. It is very hot. And the second one, examples which includes our Saharan desert, example which includes our Namib deserts, the Kalahari deserts. All the things we will be discussing not as a theory, rather as an experiential aspect. Yes or no? It is via Atlas. We will be discussing one by one. Yes, exactly online, exactly. Yes, we'll be discussing about Sahara, the Namib deserts one by one. The second one we'll be discussing this. And the third one, the third major important one. Now after this, we'll be discussing about which all things? We'll be discussing about after our deserts, we will be discussing about, we call it as the islands, the dweeps. Islands is nothing but dweeps. Now what is islands? You should open. It is a land which is surrounded by water. Nothing but the water is covered with, we call it as, covered from all the sides. We call it as what? We call it as islands. Now can you give some examples of, I can say, the islands of India or one of the largest islands of the world? It is first one, we call it as, first one we'll be discussing about what? We will be discussing about, we call it as, it is Andaman and Nicobar group of islands. Now what is the capital of Andaman and Nicobar? It is known. It is recently Port Blair has been renamed as what? It is Sri Vijayapuram. The Sri Vijayapuram, again current affairs. And the second one, we have two important group of islands. One is our Andaman and Nicobar group of islands, which is present in which sea? It is Bay of Bengal. Now with respect to our, we call it as, with respect to our Arabian Sea, we call it as Arabian Sea. This is Indian Peninsula. Now with respect to our, this one we call it as what? It is Andaman and Nicobar group of islands. Now what is the capital of Andaman and Nicobar? It is Sri Vijayapuram. The Port Blair has been renamed as what? It is Sri Vijayapuram. Yes or no? It is, we call it as, it is Sri Vijayapuram. It is Port Blair has been renamed as what? Has been renamed as, we call it as the Sri Vijayapuram. Yes or no? Sri Vijayapuram. Yes or no? Very easy. Okay. It is, we call it as Sri Vijayapuram. Okay, Sri Vijayapuram. And the second one we call it as, with respect to our Arabian Sea, we have our own islands, we call it as We have our own islands, we call it as Lakshadweep. Yes or no? We call it as Lakshadweep. And the second one we call it as Andaman and Nicobar group of islands. Now can you give some more examples related to the islands? Now the nearest one we call it as what? The Sri Lanka. Now Sri Lanka as well as India, it is separated by, it is which strait? It is Park Strait, or we call it as, majorly we call it for Gulf of Mannar. The Gulf of Mannar, we'll see all the things, what is Gulf, what is Bay, what is, we call it as the Strait, it is, we'll see all the things one by one. But just, this class is just a, it is introductory as well as just a strategy session related to, we call it as the geography. Yes or no? Now, after all the things, the physical part will be studying about the mountains, will be studying about deserts, will be studying about the islands. Along with the things, we will be studying about what? We will be studying about the concepts called as the plains. The plains ಬಗ್ಗೆ study ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಅದರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ we will also be studying about, we call it as the plateaus. Yes or no? We will be studying about the plains as well as plateaus. Now, can you give some examples of the plains as well as the plateaus? It is majorly, we call it as the Deccan Plateau, the Chota Nagpur Plateau, the Malawa Plateau, or we call it as majorly the Karnataka Plateau. We call it as, it is Telangana Plateaus, Mysore Plateau, Karnataka Plateau. Now, all these things are fine, sir. What is plateaus? What is plateaus? The tableland topography. Ignivelody. Now, don't you think this, it is this, the stage is like a plateau? Now, this stage is not a plain one, rather it is raised. The tableland topography, and this we call it as what? The plateaus. Now, plateaus in a simpler manner we call it as, it is the tableland topography we call it as the plateaus. Now, wherever you are sitting, don't you think it is like a plain? And that we call it as what? The plains. Examples? Fast. Examples which includes Ganga plains. Examples which includes Brahmaputra plains. Yes or no? All these things comes under, it is the plain regions. The plains as well as plateaus. What is plains? A plain physical topography, we call it as what? The plain physical topography, we call it as the plains, and the second one we call it as plateaus. What is plateaus? The tableland topography. Yes or no? It is the plateaus in a simpler manner we call it as the tableland topography. We call it as the plateaus. Some examples? It is Chota Nagpur Plateau, Deccan Plateau, which is the largest plateau of India. The Deccan Plateau. And the second one we call it as the Meghalaya Plateau, which is present in northeast. And the fourth one we call it as the Telangana Plateau. All this comes under, majorly we call it as tableland topography. Yes or no? Now, under our lithosphere, the first part will be, we call it as physical part or the physical aspects. Now, sir, how are you going to study, or how are we going to study? The first one we call it as, the first one under R we call it as the lithosphere. Under our lithosphere, be cautious. Under lithosphere, I've already said litho is nothing but what? Litho is nothing but land, and a sphere is nothing but regions. Now, under this, we will be studying about our first one, we call it as the physical, the geography. The physical geography. And the second one we call it as what? Second one we call it as, we will be studying about the second part we call it as human geography. Now, under human geography, which all things we will be studying here, boss? Now, what is human and what is geography? The humans, which are present above the, which are above the land, we call it as, it is human geography. Now, human geography majorly will be studying as a part of what? As a part of, we call it as a part of, we call it as lithosphere. As a part of, we call it as lithosphere. As a part of lithosphere. Yes or no? Now, while studying about the humans, while studying about the human geography as a part of our lithosphere, we will be studying about which all aspects? First, we will be studying about which all aspects? we will be studying about the first one. We call it as, it is the population related studies. Now don't you think, now which country has the highest amount of population? It is India. It is recently, or the last year, we have overtaken China also, and India has become it is the first rank with respect to the population. We have 1.4 billion population. In India dalli ಏನು ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. We have population, nothing but ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ. Yes, so this is our population. Now majorly, it is why population is highest in India. We need to study it from our geography perspective. Now, how geography is majorly a favorable conditions for it is for the existence of what? For the existence of population, or we call it as, now on what reasons, what are the reasons with respect to it is population explosion in India, and we'll be studying majorly from our geography perspective. Geography perspective, along with these things, we will be studying about the concept called as Indra Bhage, the concept of race, the concept of racism. Now, which all it is the races are present in the world? Now, which all races are present in the world level? Online fast? Yes, it is the biggest achievement we have done it. It is population. Adonde madirodu. Innenu illa. The next one we call it as, now what are the different races do we have? It is in the world. Now we have different types of races, but majorly three races. One we call it as Negrito race. Negrito and their African race. It is, we have three important races. One we call it as the Negrito. Negrito is nothing but African race. Yes or no? It is African race. And the second one we call it as Mongoloid race. I hope you guys are getting it. Okay na? 100%? Yes? Highly concentrating? Questions kerala? Yes. Pakka? Oh, okay. Then you guys have understood. It is Negrito. And the second one, yes sir, anybody? It is nothing but that's the confidence you need to have. Even in your interview also, you should have a confidence though you don't know anything. It's okay sir, let's try. It is first one we call it as Negrito. And the second one we call it as Mongoloid race. Now Mongoloid race and the Chinese race. You know what? Not because it is what? It is Mongoloid race, or we call it as Chinese race. Yes or no? It is majorly we call it as epicanthic fold. And that we call it as smaller eyes, or we call it as epicanthic fold. Yes or no? We'll be studying each and every aspect. But not now. The second one we'll be studying this. And the third important aspect, so the third important race we call it as, majorly we call it as a Western race, and that Western race we call it as Caucasoid race. Highly important one, the fair skin color, and that race we call it as what? That race we call it as Caucasoid race. Nothing but Caucasoid is nothing but what? Western race, the fair skin color. And the second one, with respect to Mongoloid, we call it as Chinese skin color. And the third one we call it as the Negrito race. Yes or no? Now we'll be studying about races. And the third one we'll be studying about the birth rate. We'll be studying about death rate. Birth rate is nothing but majorly we call it as natality. It is birth rate. In a simpler language we call it as the natality. And the second one, death rate, is called as what? It is mortality. We'll be studying about this, and we'll be studying about the sex ratio. Now, which state has the highest sex ratio? It is Kerala. The Kerala has the highest sex ratio. And the second one, which state has the lowest sex ratio? Haryana. It is Haryana has the female sex ratio, lowest female sex ratio. And the second one we call it as Kerala has the highest sex ratio. We'll be seeing all the things, and along with the things, we will be discussing about the population density. We will also be discussing about what? We will also be discussing about the population density. Now, while discussing about population density, we will talk about which state has the highest population density according to 2011 census. And second one we call it as which state has the lowest population density. Now, UP is highest populous state. That does not mean that it is highly dense state. Now highly populous one we call it as the Bihar. The highly populous one we call it as Bihar. Now all the things we'll be discussing one by one. That is, I will give you both the, it is fundamental foundation also. Along with the things, we will be discussing about the current affairs, the 2011 or the recent one I'll be discussing as a part of your course. And the third one, it is experiences course. Nothing but geography once done with the game. That is my confidence and that is my assurance also. Okay, Alva. It is at least attempt or attend some 1 week. Yes or no? It is by 1 week, at least you will be getting a hold of geography and you will be testing the geography. Now then we can push up. We will be going for a class and we will be going for via the blueprinting part. It is today only I will discuss all these aspects. In this 3 hours, I will discuss all aspects. It is the 360-degree aspects of geography. Now which all things we will be discussing as a part of this, we will discuss one by one. Yes or no? Now this is about our human geography. And which is the third geography we have? Begin fast. Online. Yes. Yes. Begin fast. Then begin it. Hello, kitki मुझ पड़ती है. World geography? No. It is the third one. We call it as the economic geography. Yes or no? It is now under physical only. We'll be studying about the world as well as India. And with respect to human also, we'll be studying about India and the world. And economy also, or economic geography also, we'll be studying about what? Both India and the world, both India and the world, simultaneously we'll be doing it. Yes or no? Now the third one we call it as, what is the third one? It is economic geography. Now while studying about economic geography, which all things we need to study first? Give me some at least hint. So which all things we need to discuss? First one, we will be discussing about the industries. We'll be discussing about which all industries? We will be discussing about it is agro-based industries. We will be discussing about the textile industries or pharmaceutical industries. It has been distributed across which all regions? Now in economic geography, in a simpler manner, we will be discussing about the first concept. We call it as the concept of agriculture. The concept of agriculture. Now under agriculture, we will be discussing about different types of agriculture. We will be discussing about the seasons. The monsoon, we will be discussing about the monsoon. We will be discussing about the different seasons. Now which all seasons do we have in our world? Or specifically India, how many seasons do we have? 3 or 4? It is, we have 3 agricultural seasons. One we call it as the Kharif season. It is also called as the rainy crops. And the second one we call it as Rabi season. Now what is Rabi? Now Rabi is nothing but winter crop. And the third one we call it as Zaid. We'll be discussing this boss. Now while discussing about this economic part, the first and the foremost one we call it as the agriculture. Now under agriculture, we will be discussing about, now who is the father of agriculture? No one. It's a time immemorial crop. No one is the father of agriculture. But if I modify this, who is the father of green revolution? Wrong. Yes. Now again wrong. Now the question itself is wrong. Now you should say, sir, father of green revolution, is it at world level or at India level? If I continue the statement saying that the father of green revolution at India level, you said was right. Normal more long. And the second one, if I say green revolution father at India level, you said was right. Hope you're getting it. It is adhikoskara, the questions becomes important here and you should understand the first questions. And later on, this anyways, I'll discuss as a part of your course. It is not an issue. Okay, Alva. This is majorly under agriculture part. We will be discussing about, sir, which all things we'll be discussing under. Majorly we'll be discussing about first agriculture as such. And the second one we will be discussing about, we call it as what? The seasons. The second one we call it as seasons. Now which all seasons do we have? Now we've already said there are three important seasons, boss. Now one we call it as what? One we call it as the Kharif crop. Second one we call it as Rabi. And the third one we call it as what? Zaid crops. It is Zaid. Okay, Alva. Yes or no? It is Kharif is also called as what? Is also called as monsoon. Now we'll be discussing about monsoon. First one, monsoon, the major important one from our Indian geography, we will be discussing about monsoon. The southwestern monsoon, why there is rainfall in Delhi or in India or in Bangalore. We will see all those things. First one, monsoon. And the second one, we will be discussing about this crop, we call it as monsoon crop. Can you give some examples of Kharif crops? That is majorly we call it as the rice or paddy. Now paddy does not come under Kharif because it can be grown in any condition. Or a rice, it can grow in all the seasons. But major agi, sir, monsoon crop yavadu andre, which includes majorly we call it as the ragi. Majorly which includes groundnuts. All these things comes under the Malegalada, it is Bedegalu anta karitivi. It is we call it as the Kharif. Yes or no? Yes. See, if I am using Kannada, I'll repeat it, not an issue. Elladu Kannada artha agutagli. Okay, yes. Okay. If I say it in Kannada, I'll repeat it in English. But majority it will be in English, not an issue. Okay. These are Kharif. And the second one we call it as Rabi. Now what is Rabi? Winter crop. Can you give some examples of winter? Beginning. It is majorly we call it as the bajra, the wheat. All this comes under the Rabi. Now Zaid crops is nothing but summer crops. Now can you give some examples of summer? Now summer which includes the water rich the crops. Now which is water rich crops? The watermelon, the cucumber, the mangoes, all things. Yes or no, boss? Clear enough. This is our first one we'll be discussing as a part of our seasons. And the second one under agriculture, we'll be discussing about, we call it as different agriculture crops. We'll be discussing about horticulture, we'll be discussing about plantation crops like rubber, sugarcane, aracanut, the coffee, the tea. Yes or no? And along with these things, we will be, second one, we'll be discussing about the different minerals under our economic geography. Now, what all different minerals do we have? Now, there are only two types. One we call it as, there is metallic minerals, and the second one we call it as what? Non-metallic. Now, under this, we'll be discussing about the iron and steel. We'll be discussing about copper. We'll be discussing about aluminium, we'll be discussing about zinc, we'll be discussing about uranium, the thorium minerals. And we'll be discussing about why few mineral industries are being established in a particular locality, why not in other regions? Why IT is present in Bangalore, why not in Delhi? Why industries are present majorly in Chotanagpur Plateau, why not in some Mysore or some Thiruvananthapuram, etc.? Why? We'll be discussing about the geographical spread also. We'll be discussing about geographical distribution also. We'll be discussing about what? Geographical distribution also. As a part of our, we call it as the economic geography. The first one is agriculture. Second one, we'll discuss about the minerals. And the third one, we will discuss about what? We will discuss about, it is the aspects called as, the third one we call it as the spread of industries. The spread of industries, agro-based industries, mineral-based industries. We will be discussing all those things, boss. One by one, we'll be discussing. This is our first one, we call it as Lithosphere. Now, if you are aware, I am discussing from the single topic called as, what is geography? Under this, what? We have discussed about what? We have discussed about the first one, geography is a word which has been derived from where? It's a Greek word, and the Greek word which means what? The geo, and the second one we call it as what? The graphy. Now what is geo and what is graphy? Fast. Geo means it is earth, graphy means what? I study. Now with respect to our earth, we are studying about two important things here. The one we call it as what? One we call it as interior of the earth. And second one we call it as what? Exterior. Now I said while studying about interior of the earth, we'll be studying about minerals, we'll be studying about rocks, we'll be studying about crust, core, mantle, and we'll also be studying about E prime layer. Yes or no? Yes. The second one, while studying about exterior, I've already said. Now while discussing about exterior, we will be discussing about our three important things majorly. Now one we call it as what? One we call it as lithosphere. Now lithosphere anna study madbekadre, while studying about lithosphere, we will study about different aspects. Now what are the different aspects we'll be studying here? And lithosphere. Now be cautious, under litho, we'll be studying about three things. Litho is nothing but land. It is, while studying about the land one, we will be studying about the physical aspects of it is lithosphere. Second one we call it as humans, and the third one it is perfect. Yes or no? Now is the first part clear? Now the first part clear, can we go for second one? Now second one, now we are discussing under first part itself. Be cautious here. Second we will discuss about how, and the third one we call it as why we need to study. We'll see all the things one by one. But second one we call it as atmosphere. Now second one, it's our atmosphere, yes or no? Okay. Now the second one we call it as atmosphere. Now recently, don't you think this atmospheric part of geography was in news? Now if it is yes, now why was in news? Both online and offline? Yes. About climate, okay. But recently was in news. For most important reason. The most important reason here is recently Shubhanshu Shukla. Got it, sir. Now what is Shubhanshu Shukla? It is what is the Shubhanshu Shukla? Now why this was in news? Now majorly this was in news for a major reason called as the Shubhanshu Shukla has become the first person to go to where? First person to go to, we call it as, is it space? No. Now space, who is the first person to go to space? It is Rakesh Sharma in the 1984. Now who is the first person to go to ISS? Now who is the first Indian person to go to ISS? Andre, who is the first person? It is, we call it as Shubhanshu Shukla. The first person to go to, we call it as the ISS, we call it as Shubhanshu Shukla. It is Shubhanshu Shukla. Don't you think this was in news? Now majorly he went to ISS, majorly to study about the atmosphere, majorly to study about the climate, majorly to study about what? Majorly to study about the atmospheric aspects. Now with this context in our mind, we'll be studying about our atmosphere majorly from our current affairs. Now sir, while studying about atmosphere, now what is atmo? What is sphere, boss? At least the sphere is clear now. What does sphere means? The region. Yes or no? The sphere is nothing but a region. And what is atmo? First. What is atmo? It is, atmo is nothing but, we call it as the air. Atmo is nothing but the air region. Now while discussing about this topic again, we will be discussing atmosphere from our three important aspects again. Now one we call it as physical aspects of atmosphere, and the second one we call it as the human aspects of atmosphere, and the third one we call it as what? It has economic aspects. Hope you are getting the idea now. Now how to study the subject. It has the second one we call it as we will be studying this subject. Majorly which one? The atmosphere has been majorly studied from, it as we call it as the three important aspects here. Now what is that three important aspects here? What is that three important aspects online? Yes. Exactly. Now the three important aspects which includes, the first one we call it as what? The physical aspects. And the second one we call it as the humans which are present in where? Which are present in the space. And the third one we call it as the economic part of our geography. Economic part of our geography. Yes or no? Now, with respect to while studying about physical 1, which all things we need to study here? First, which all things? Now, we need to study about, at least just give me a hint. The first one we need to study about under our physical aspects. First, we need to study about the major aspect called as what is the difference between weather and what is the difference between climate. Now, what is weather and what is climate? First, what is weather versus what is climate? Online, offline, first. What is weather and what is climate? Exactly. It is, weather is a short-term phenomenon. The day-to-day happenings with respect to our atmosphere, we call it as what? It is weather. Over a longer period of time, for a period of 30 years. Highly important one, I'll discuss all these things, not an issue. It is, the climate is nothing but a long-term phenomenon, whereas what is weather? Weather we call it as the short-term phenomenon, or we call it as the day-to-day happenings, we call it as what? Weather. Whereas the long-term phenomenon for a period of 30 years, average 30 years, we call it as the climate. Now, what is the climate of India? What is the climate of India? The climate of India, normally we call it as monsoonal climate, or we call it as it is the tropical evergreen type of climate. The tropical climate is the majorly we'll see what is tropical. All those things we'll see one by one as a part of this. Okay, second one. I hope you guys are getting it. How much percentage? 100 paka. Adunu vela kashta, sir. Okay, this is majorly we call it as, first one is this. And the second one we call it as, now what is second one we'll be discussing as a part of our atmosphere. The second part we will be studying here, we call it as, majorly we'll be studying about the atmosphere and the gases, dust particles. Now we'll be studying as a part of, we call it as atmosphere. Now what is the composition of gases we'll be studying here? Now, what is the composition of gases? Now, the composition of our atmosphere. Now, which gases constitutes the dominant gas with respect to our atmosphere? It is nitrogen. What percentage? It is majorly we call it as in and around 78% is the nitrogen composition. We'll be studying this. Followed by nitrogen, we'll be studying about, we call it as the oxygen, the argon, the carbon dioxide, followed by the different, we call it as the compounds. Yes or no? Along with the things, we will be discussing about, we call it as majorly about the dust particles. Yes or no? We'll be studying here. And the third major important one, understand your boss, it is after this composition. Don't you think we need to study about a concept called as clouds? Now, all these gases, when it starts to rise, and leads to formation of what? Leads to formation of clouds. Now, under this clouds, we will be discussing about different types of clouds. Now, what are the different types of clouds do we have? Begin. What are the different types of clouds we need to discuss here? It is majorly we'll be studying in an organized fashion called as, it is the lower clouds, the middle clouds, and the last one we call it what? Higher clouds. We will be discussing as a part of this, we call it as the lower clouds, the middle clouds, and the third one we call it as what? Higher clouds. It is higher, the clouds will be studying about all the things in a simpler manner, and will experience via images, via the internet images, via the real life experiences we'll see. Now, which one will bring rainfall? Which one does not bring rainfall? We'll see A to Z concepts related to clouds also. Yes or no? Along with the things, we will be discussing about a concept called as, now which one? It is after this, our fourth one we call it as the PPT. What is PPT in geography? Is it PowerPoint presentation? No. It is the PPT in a simpler manner. In geography we call it as precipitation. Now what is precipitation? What is precipitation meaning? The precipitation meaning we call it as rainfall. In a simpler manner, precipitation we call it as rainfall. Now what are different types of rainfalls do we have? Fast. No. Now what all rainfalls do we have? Now we have different types of rainfall. The three types of rainfall. We have three types of rainfall. Three types of rainfall. The first one we call it as, it is the which one? It is the conventional. The first one we call it as the convectional current or the convectional rainfall. Perfect, yes. The first one, convectional, the rainfall. Now by raising, because of higher temperature, the temperature will start to rise and leads to formation of what? Clouds. And adinda male bandre, if the rainfall comes via this, we call it as what? The conventional. It is the convectional. And the second one we call it as, the frontal rainfall. The second one we call it as frontal rainfall. We'll see this. What is this frontal? Now major this frontal rainfall happens in we call it as Western Ghats, or majorly happens during we call it as monsoons. It happens during monsoons. We'll see this. The second one, what is the third type of rainfall? It is the third type of rainfall we call it as. The first one we call it as the convectional, second one we call it as the frontal, and the third one we call it as, it is the orographic rainfall. It is orographic. We'll see all the things. What is orographic? Monsoon has the play with respect to all these three. It is orographic, frontal. Now frontal is nothing but major which is seen in, we call it as higher regions. Higher regions andre near to what? Near to polar regions. We'll see all those things. The polar, whereas the orographic is normally seen with respect to, we call it as mountains. We'll see this one by one. Now in the normal equatorial regions we can see the convectional currents. We'll see this. And followed by this, we will be discussing about the concept of what? The concept of winds. The concept of winds. Now what all different types of winds do we have? Now we have three types of winds. One we call it as permanent winds. A wind which flows, I can say, particularly in a single direction. In a single direction, and that type of winds we call it as what? That type of winds we call it as the permanent winds in an exactly same direction. So example heli antandre, examples which includes the trade winds, example which includes westerlies, example which includes the northeastern winds, the polar winds, permanent. Yes or no? It is first one. And the second one we call it as, now opposite of permanent enu, the temporary, it is also called as what? The seasonal winds. Now can you give some examples of seasonal winds? Now what is seasonal? Now based on the time period, based on the season, it starts to change its direction. We call it as what? We call it as temporary boss. Now can you give some examples? Example is nothing but, perfect, that is local winds. That local winds. Now say temporary winds ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ್ದು ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ majorly we call it as our monsoon. Majorly what monsoon? We call it as southwestern monsoon. Majorly we call it as the southwestern monsoon, or we call it as monsoon in general. Comes under where? Comes under temporary. And the last one which you said, the Mistral, the Chinook, Harmattan, or Lu, all this comes under. Our third type of winds we call it as what? the local winds. Yes or no? See, this is all about syllabus of geography. This is all about syllabus of geography. If you know this, and this should be in your tips, and I will make you to remember it in your tips, geography done the game. Yes or no? Yes, it is majorly we call it as the permanent winds, the temporary winds, and second one we call it as what? The local winds. Examples of local winds, which includes Chinook. Chinook from where? The North America. The Fawn, the Mistral from Europe. Harmattan from we call it as Africa. From Asia we call it as Lu. Yes or no? Yes, at least feeling somewhat just a confidence at least. Sir, we need to exactly it is read this all the aspects. Yes or no? It is majorly will be discussing as a part of our we call it as majorly with respect to physical one. Now along with the things we will be discussing about the different parts. Now different parts, which is that sixth one, sir. Now sixth one we'll be discussing about the cyclones. We will be discussing about the cyclones. Now what do you mean by cyclones? Now have you heard about cyclones at least? Yes or no? Now where normally the cyclones impacts? Now normally cyclones impacts the coastal states or coastal countries. Now India is one of this. Now under this we will be studying about what is cyclones, how cyclones are being named, how cyclones are named, and we'll be discussing about tropical cyclones, extratropical cyclones, A to Z. We'll be discussing about El Nino, we'll be discussing about La Nino, we'll be discussing about ENSO. ಕೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ಅಟ್ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಹೋಗ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿದಿರೋ ಇಲ್ವೋ ಎಸ್ ಕೇಳಿದಿರೋ ಇಲ್ವೋ it is will be discussing about El Nino. El Nino majorly with respect to our South America. El Nino. Second one will be discussing about La Nino. We'll be discussing about La Nino. Now El Nino is nothing but increase in temperature in South America. La Nina is nothing but it is intense low temperature. Now which one is good for India? Low temperature or it has high temperature? Fast. Okay. Well, so other things. Now if you want to say yes or no, it is you need to have a basics. And that basics and that fundamental rules to study about geography, you need to know. Now always wind moves from which pressure to which pressure. And second one, we need to know about Coriolis force. We need to know about gravitational force. If you know some 5 fundamental basics, done. End of the story. You can say which one is good, which one is bad. It is you can say all the 6. Yes or no? Then this is our second one. The third one, we will be discussing about a concept called as ENSO. What is ENSO? It is El Nino, La Nino, Southern Oscillation. The mix of both. The mix of El Nino and La Nina. We call it as what? We call it as ENSO. Yes or no? It's not a hen alla, chicken alla. It is ENSO. It is we call it as ENSO, El Nino, La Nino, Southern Oscillation. Shravan alla tinangilvala. Yes or no? One thing lo. It is ENSO. It is El Nino, La Nino, Southern Oscillation. Yes or no? Yes. This is our first one. And the third one we call it as IOD. What is IOD? What's IOD? Try fastest. What IOD? Indian Ocean Dipole. It does IOD means Indian Ocean Dipole. Now under this IOD we'll be discussing about our positive IOD, and the second one we call it as negative IOD. We'll be discussing this positive, negative, but majorly this is called as current affairs. We'll be studying as a part of we call it as a part of which one? As a part of we call it as it is the first one we call it as the physical aspects of atmospheric geography. As a part of atmosphere, the physical aspects. The second one, can we study about human? Yes or no? Now under human atmosphere, human part of our atmosphere, we will be studying about which all aspects? First, under are the human aspects, human geography related to what? It is first begin under our atmosphere. Now which all things we need to study here? The first one, while studying about atmosphere from our human geography, we will be studying about humans who are present in atmosphere. Now where are humans who are present in atmosphere? Now to study that, we will be studying about the different layers of atmosphere. Now what are the different layers of atmosphere do we have? It is perfect. The different layers which includes tropo. The lowest layer we call it as tropo, and the second layer we call it as the stratosphere. The third one we call it as meso. Fourth one we call it as the thermo, and the last one we call it as exosphere. This we need to know. Now while studying about this part, we need to majorly study about a concept called as ISS. Now what is ISS? International Space Station. Now while studying about International Space Station, we will be studying about axiom formation. How this axiom formation is an evidence to study about what? Our own geography. We'll be studying here. And the third one we'll also be studying about a concept called as, which all concepts? ISS, axiom 4, the microgravity. We'll be studying about why are we studying all these layers as a part of our human geography related to what? Atmosphere. We'll be studying this, and the last one we call it as what? Economic geography. We call it as economic geography. Okay, now the last one, the third one we call it as economic geography related to atmosphere. Now my question here is atmosphere beneficial for our humanity? Is atmosphere beneficial for our humanity? Beneficial or no? Is it beneficial or not? Now if it is beneficial, how it is beneficial? First, now don't you think this atmosphere is majorly beneficial with respect to launching of various satellites? Yes or no? Sir, which all satellites, sir? Now majorly we call it as we have a satellites majorly for providing navigation. Yes or no, boss? It is the maps works on which satellite? The navigation satellites. Now under our economic geography, we will be studying majorly the satellites which is used for what purpose? Navigation purpose. The navigation purpose. Now with respect to our navigation purpose, the different countries have launched a different navigation purpose. The GPS which has been launched by Yahoo. The GPS which has been launched by, we call it as the USA. The GPS we call it as, it is global positioning system. Global positioning system which has been launched by, it is USA, which is the satellite which has been launched by India. It is, we call it as NAVIC, or we call it as IRNSS, Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System. Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, which has been launched by our India or Bharat. And the third one, which is the satellite which has been launched by European Union. It is, we call it as, it is Galileo. The Galileo is a mission which has been launched by the European Union. Now don't you think all this are the application part of our economic atmosphere? Yes or no, boss? Now, along with these things, we are also going for studying of a topics called as, it is for usage of internet, for usage of communication purpose. We are also using, or we call it as, now how radio works, boss? Now how radio works? FM works, frequency modulation. How FM works, how radio works, how our DTH works, how our internet works. For all this purpose, we want it is atmosphere. We want atmosphere, and that part we call it as atmospheric, the studies majorly with atmosphere. Majorly we call it as economic atmosphere. Now, in studying about economic atmosphere, we will be studying about majorly all these aspects. Now, how our economic aspect is used in, it is radio waves. How it is used in, we call it as the FMs, the frequency modulation. How it is useful in, we call it as OTT. What is OTT? Over the top OTT. How are D2D, direct to device, DTH, direct to home. Yes or no? All these things works on an aspect called as our geography. Which part of geography? It is atmospheric part of geography. Yes or no? Now recently our BSNL has launched we call it as, it is satellite based internet. Now for satellite based internet, they are using a concept called as what? It is atmospheric, we call it as the geography, majorly from our economic perspectives. Yes or no? Yes, this is majorly we call it as what? Majorly we call it as the which one? The majorly we call it as the second part we call it as atmosphere. Done. Now is there any doubts till here? Doubts Silva. Now shall we go for third one? Now which is the third one? It is third one, we call it as hydrosphere. Now what is hydro and what do you mean by sphere? What do you mean by sphere? Now hydro means water and sphere means a region. A region which is covered with water, we call it as what? Hydrosphere. Now under the hydrosphere, which all things will be discussing here, boss? It is majorly, we will be discussing about the physical aspects related to hydro. Second one, human aspects related to hydro. And the third part will be discussing about what? It is majorly we call it as economic part. Yes or no? Now give me some idea where it is under hydrosphere where human part is being studied. Majorly the aspects related to, we call it as the recent one where humans are going towards it is below water. That project we call it as what? Samudrayan mission. Samudrayan, major for extraction of minerals from the deep oceans. Scuba divers, the oceanal swimmers, all these things comes under where? Human. Now can you give some examples of economic geography where our geography is used for? Where our geography is used for what? It is used for economic purpose. Where? Begin. Like, exactly. It is hydroelectricity. In a simpler one, it is hydroelectricity. Second, the first and the biggest one we call it as, it is water is being used for consumption alone. Without water there is no humanity. Without water there is no life. Without water there is no universe. Without water there is no earth. Without water there is no blue planet. Yes or no? Now don't you think it is water is not considered as an economic resource? Water is considered as what? Fundamental aspect. Without water, nothing. Now our body is made up of what? 70% made up of water. Now don't you think it's an economic resource? Or is it a fundamental building block of humanity? And the second one, don't you think with water our civilizations developed? Take an example of any civilization. Or take an example of any villages. Now any villages in a traditional period, they used to construct near to the water bodies. Hope you are getting it. An example which includes the Indus civilization. Take an example of Mesopotamian civilization, Egyptian civilization. Take an example of Machu Picchu civilization. Take an example of one of the largest dynasties. They constructed or they established their headquarters near to the coast. Take an example of Marathas. Take an example of, we call it as British. Take an example of Vijayanagara. Take an example of Cholas. Yes or no? It is, be it the political, be it the economical, be it any resource, it is water is considered to be it is fundamental, the basic necessity for humanity. Yes, either it can be for study purpose or drinking purpose, or it can be for the economic resource. Water is considered to be building one. Yes or no? Now, under our geography, we will be studying about all the three aspects. And the other reason we call it as, we'll be studying about a 360 aspect of our earth. Both within the earth as well as outside the earth, we'll be studying under this geography. Yes or no? Now, sir, how are we going to study this? The third part called as hydro. The third part called as hydrosphere. Now, while studying about hydrosphere, my first question here is, what is hydro? Hydro is nothing but water. And the second one, sphere is nothing but, I already said, sphere is nothing but what? A region. Now, sir, hydro antandre, it is in a simpler manner, we call it as water, and sphere is nothing but what? The region. Yes or no? Now this hydrosphere, it is divided into what? How many division? First, how many division? It is divided into three things. One we call it as, the first one we call it as the physical part of this hydrosphere, and the second one we call it as the human part of, we call it as the geography, the human part of geography, and the third one we call it as what? It is economic one. I hope you guys are getting the idea. I'm using the same blueprint from starting to ending. The same things. Nothing but this, in this manner you need to study geography. Random. You should never read any subject in random manner. And beat any subject, boss. Beat any subject. Not only with geography. Beat any subject. You need to know three important things before starting any subject. Be cautious. First thing here is, what is that particular subject? Now, if I ask a simple question, now what is polity? What is economics? What is science and tech? What is history? What is geography? Are you in a position to say some 10 points? Have you researched on your own? If yes, can you give some 10 points? No. That is the situation we are in. And the second one, why are we studying all these subjects? Syllabus is there, the faculty is coming and the faculty is teaching. And whatever the faculty is teaching, that is important. Yes or no? Is it the right way, or is it the right strategy to just clear this UPSC exam or study for this exam, prepare for this exam? No, boss. But majority fail in the planning stage. They does not plan. But whatever the academy or institution does, it's right. Okay, we do it right. I'm not saying it's wrong. But have you researched on your own? Why we need to study the subject? Now, before coming to this class, have you researched something about the geography? Have you researched something about the faculty? Where you need to trust at least for 2 months? Yes or no? See, this you should do, boss. Yes or no, boss? We need to do it. We are not doing it. And we are not planning. And we are failing it in the first stage itself, the planning stage. Yes or no? Yes. These are the major one. I just will see all the things. Yes, yes. Basic to advanced, basic to advanced. And you are in race. Yalla kurigalidare. It is nanu kuri tara hogta idini sir. That's the game. Now if you want to win a game, if it is a game, don't you think first you should know the rules? Without rules you are playing. Now without rules, don't you think it's a waste of time and it's illegal also? Yes or no? It is. If this is a game, you need to know the rules, and you don't know the rules, and you are playing. And how can you expect a result? Yes or no? Done? We'll see all those things. In my class, it is, I will give all those inputs. Now, how to write answer writing? What should be your 7-pronged strategy of answer writing? How to solve MCQs? And the third one, how to read from the different subjects? How to blueprint? How to organize? How to make a content? How to revise? How to plan? A to Z content. For different subjects, not in geography, the A to Z subjects, the same blueprint, the same strategy will apply. Okay, Alva, we'll see all those things. It is with respect to while studying about the physical aspects of hydrosphere. Now, which all things we'll be studying here? First, which all things we will be studying here? Which all things we will be studying here? Begin. Which all things? Now, the first and the foremost one, while studying about, we call it as while studying about this physical part, the first and the foremost aspect which we will be discussing here is about a concept called as oceans. The first one, now, is oceans dominant or land is dominant? It is oceans are dominant. Ocean constitute what? In and around 3/4. I think that 70 to 75% of our earth is covered with what? The oceans or the water. Now, with respect to this, we'll be studying this water to land ratio. And the second one, we will be discussing about the lithosphere, or we call it as the landforms which are found below water. Now, is the oceans plain or it is different topography there? And the third one, we will be studying about how oceans are formed. How oceans are formed. Majorly, we'll be studying about what? We will be studying about the evolution of, we call it as the oceans, or evolution of hydrosphere we'll be studying here. Evolution of hydrosphere. And the third one, the third major important one, we will be studying about the composition of the oceans. Now, oceans are made up of what? Oceans are made up of the different minerals. Water is dissolved with a number of minerals. Now, which is that mineral which is dominant in the ocean? Basic question. Which is that minerals which is dominant anta keladadre? It is, we call it as the chlorine. It's not sodium, boss. As we have remembered from our, it is school in the, it's NaCl. Now, sodium is not dominant. Rather, the chlorine is dominant in the oceans. We'll be discussing this. Along with the things, we will be discussing about the different oceans. Now, what all different oceans do we have? Which is the largest ocean? Which is the smallest ocean? First, now, which is we call it as the largest ocean, we call it as Pacific Ocean, and the smallest ocean, we call it as Arctic Ocean. The Arctic and Antarctic Ocean is the smallest one. We'll be discussing this. How these are formed and how it is formed also. Evolution, we'll see all those things. And along with the things, we will be discussing about the concept called as ocean currents. We'll be discussing about ocean currents. We will be discussing about, we call it as the concept of tides. The concept of, we call it as the tides. The concept of, we call it as, the concept of majorly we call it as the ocean topography. Now what is ocean topography? Our ocean topography is made up of continental shelf, continental slope, different ridges within the oceans. We'll be seeing all those things with image. With image, it has the most beautiful images. With images, we'll be studying the complete, we call it as the geography. The complete geography, it is directly from our internet. We'll be discussing all these aspects. Under this, we'll be studying as a part of what we call it as the physical aspect of what? The hydrosphere. Yes or no? Hope you guys are getting it. The second one we call it as the human part of geography. Now while discussing about human part of geography, which all things we'll be discussing here? Now human part of geography. Now the humans, it is humans near to ocean or in the oceans. It is near to oceans. Now that near to oceans we call it as the coastal settlements. Hope you're getting it. Now majority of population. Now out of 8 billion population with respect to the world, approximately 8 billion population, now majority 40 to 50% of the population they are found in where? Near to hydro. Near to hydrosphere. Now sir, while discussing about this part, why humans are present near to where? It is present near to coast. Why they are present near to coastal ecosystem? Why? Why? It is because near to coast we have a moderate type of climatic conditions. Now if we take an example of near to coast, why? Because we have an ecosystem called as moderate type of ecosystem. We have an ecosystem called as moderate ecosystem, or moderate, we call it as moderate temperature is found near the coast. If it is moderate, don't you think huge amount of population they will start to settle near the coast? Yes or no? Second one. And after this, it is will also be seeing with respect to, we call it as humans who are present in the, it is on the surface of water, majorly above the oceans. Now sir, above the oceans, below the oceans, what are these humans doing it? Now majorly the humans above the surface of the oceans, they are going for different economic activity, different R&D, research and development, different, we call it as different generation of hydroelectricity. Under human part of geography, majorly we'll be studying about humans who are present in where? We call it as the hydrosphere. Yes or no? Majorly we'll be studying about our major mission called as Samudrayan mission. Under this we'll be studying about an aspect called as Samudrayana mission. We'll be studying about, we call it as the Samudrayan mission. Okay, alva. Idhar ಬಗ್ಗೆ majorly we'll be studying about the Samudrayan mission, the deep ocean mission ಅಂತ ಕರೀತೀವಿ. It is also called as the deep Indian ocean mission. We'll be studying as a part of, we call it as human geography. Now these are prestigious mission. We call it as the deep ocean mission ಅಂತ ಕೂಡ ಕರೀತೀವಿ. Deep ocean mission. Okay now. Yes or no? This we call it as the hydrospheric part of human geography. Second, the last one we call it as economic geography. Now what are the economic benefits of it? As we call it as the water. Now I have already said it is water is a fundamental aspect. Now water is used for what? Drinking water. Now water is used for hydroelectricity. Water is used for fishing. The water is used for transportation. Water is used for tourism. Yes or no, boss? There are n number of hundreds and hundreds of significance. and that comes under where? That comes under a geography called as, what type of geography? What type of the geography? And that type of geography we call it as economic geography. That part of geography we call it as economic geography. Yes or no? Now sir, while discussing about economic part of our geography, this economic part of our geography, which all things we'll be discussing here? Now how our oceans are important from our economic resource point of view. Now can you give some examples? Whatever I've said, except that, can you give some examples where economic geography can be used in different resources? The first one, it is used in where? It is used in, we call it as, it is tourism. It is used as a tourism activity. This economic resource is used with respect to the trade purpose, the trade related aspects. This can be used for fishing, the mining. Okay, next one, try. Establishment of civilizations, origination of life. Seventh, try first. Nidha martira tane? Okay, I hope you guys are not sleeping. Martira tane? Ninge onthara kan tagonde nidha martidira. Okay, next one. Try. What is the next one? It is the existence of life. Now, along with these things, water supports huge amount of biodiversity also, which includes mangroves, which includes the corals, which includes fishes, which includes prawns, which includes crabs. Yes or no? All these things are the benefit of what? All these things are the benefit of, we call it as the geography, or in simpler manner we call it as the oceans. Yes or no? Now is the first part, is it clear now? Now under our first part, is there any doubts? Is there any doubts under our first part? Is there any doubts with respect to first part? Is the first part clear? Now what is geography? Is it clear? Yes. Now if it is clear, the second one we call it as why we need to study. Why we need to study what? Why we need to study geography? Why? First, why geography is required online? Why? Yes, exactly, online, yeah, exactly, thank you. Yes, okay, Why we need to study geography? Geography ಏನು ಗೊತ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ? It is majorly, there are a number of reasons. One can be with respect to knowledge, and second one can be with respect to marks. But I always say it is with respect to not with respect to knowledge, only and only with respect to marks. Because ನನಗೆ marks ಬೇಕು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. Now why I am studying different? It is subjects. Why should I need to study different subjects? That is marks box. It is either directly or indirectly ನನಗೆ marks ಬೇಕು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. But should I need to gain knowledge? Pakka? Okay, if that is the case, with knowledge comes marks, or with marks comes knowledge? It is Sadhu Jamanatu. Now with marks comes knowledge. How? Nothing that it is nee vedange knowledge. Nothing that every day I am reading newspaper. But every day I am reading newspaper, majorly I am reading, it is cinema news. Or I am reading political news. Knowledge increase ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ. I am increasing my knowledge. Does it mean that will it come in marks or will it come in exam? No. But if I am reading it from the perspective of marks, will it gain knowledge? Yes. Hope you are getting it. It is, and that's the reason you should have your own path. That is, you should never follow the path which is followed by majority. Rather, you should create your own path. Now, that path we call it as planning realistically. The realistic planning. The first one is marks. Now, sir, now, always and always remember this. It is with knowledge comes marks, and it's a age-old the phenomenon. Now, with marks comes knowledge. Now, with marks comes knowledge. Now, automatically, if you are reading it from the marks perspective, by analyzing the syllabus, by analyzing the previous year questions, PYQs, by analyzing the pattern, don't you think my knowledge will start to increase? That knowledge will be from the perspective of our own examination called as, it is competitive exams called as UPSC exam, Union Public Service Commission examination. Yes or no? Now this we call it as with marks comes knowledge. So all these are fine, Now if it is marks, how many marks from prelims, how many marks from we call it as the mains? How many marks we will get it from the prelims in UPSC CSE examination? UPSC CSE examination. And how many marks we will get it from mains? At least you should have tried this before entering this class. But Marila. But how many at least on an average? It is 15 marks for questions. It is being pattern it has 15 questions. It is, we call it as, it is how many marks? It is 15 to 17 questions. It has been asked on an average. By analyzing, it is the syllabus from 2023 in the up till what? Up till the recent 2025 prelims examination, our average marks is what? 15 to 17 questions are being asked from. Which one? It is geography. Now if it is 15 questions, Andra, each and every question carrying 2 marks? Yes or no? Now each and every question carrying the 2 marks. Now if that is the case, how many questions total? It is, we call it as 32. It is 34 marks. From prelims. Now this has been asked from which paper? Is it from GS1 or GS2? It is GS paper 1. We call it as the paper 1 of prelims, the civil services examination. The civil services examination. This is our first one. And the second one with respect to our mains. With respect to our mains, now what type of, or which paper does it contain geography? Which paper contains geography as a specific one? Now the GS1 paper, it does consist of which all things? Now the GS1 paper of means UPSC CSE now consists of how many sections, Andre? It consists of, we call it as the 3 to 4 sections. 3 to 4 sections. The 3 to 4 sections, the first section we call it as history. The first section we call it as history. Now this history consists of art and culture. Second one we call it as modern history, the post-independence history, and the last one we call it as the world history. Now complete history in the, how many marks will you be getting every year? I will be getting at least, or we'll be getting average again. We'll be getting how many marks? It is, we call it as 125 marks is being asked from. It is, we call it as the first section. we call it as the first section called as it is history, art and culture, the modern history followed by post as well as the world history. Yes or no? Do you guys want a break or should I continue? Break ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತಾ? ಎಷ್ಟು ನಿಮಿಷ ಬೇಕಾಗತ್ತೆ? Some 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes. Okay, we'll take a break of 10 minutes. ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ we'll continue. Now we'll continue this. Now the time is 5:45. Now we'll come back at 55. Okay. Now we'll go for a break. Okay. Okay, shall we continue? Now the next one, we were discussing about our marks allocation from our mains. Yes sir. Now with respect to the mains allocation, I said GS1 consists of how many things? First, now GS1 I said it does consist of the 3 to 4 sections. Now major sections are 3. Now which is that major sections? Now first one we call it as history. Now as a part of history, majorly we'll be discussing about what? The art and culture. And the second one we call it as modern history, the post-independence history, and the last one we call it as what? The world history. Yes or no? The world history we'll be discussing here. Now this is our first one, majorly from our history part, and the second one we call it as, now which is the second part we'll be discussing here. Now second part we call it as society, and the third part we call it as what? Geography. Now with respect to while discussing about society, now under this we call it geography. The first part 50% of the weightage is being given to Yadike. History. Now out of 250 marks, how many marks will it be? Will we be getting from? It is history, 50, 125 marks. 125, and the rest 125 marks we'll get it from where? We'll get it from majorly we call geography as well as society. Now from society we'll be getting some 50 marks. Now rest 75 marks we'll be getting from where? We will be getting it from geography. Normally this will be our allocation. Now these are three things. One we call it as the 50% marks or the 50% weightage, which is given for what? History part. Now because major, which include 4 sections, art and culture, the post-independence, the modern, as well as the world history. And the next one we call it as society. It is normally the 50 marks. And the second or the third one, okay, the society, the 50 marks, and the third one we call it as geography related aspects. Now geography majorly, which includes our 75 marks. Now 75 marks, and how many questions we can expect, sir, out of the 75 marks? How many? It is either the questions will be 10 marks or the questions will be what? 15 marks. Normally we'll be getting some 2 questions of we call it as 15 marks, 30 marks. Now the next one will be majorly we call it as some 4 questions of 10 marks. Either this can be ratio, the 4:2, or I will say it is that 10 marks or 15 marks. The 10 marks or 15 marks. Now with respect to 10 marks, it can be 3 questions. If it is 3 questions, it will be either 3, some 3 into 10 marks, 30 marks, it is 3 into 15, we call it as 45, 75. Or it can be some 4 questions, or it can be 2 questions from here. 2 questions is nothing but what? 30 marks. Here 4 questions nothing but 40 marks. Either it can be this ratio, or it can be a third ratio called as the 45 plus 40 also sometime. It can be 85 also. But normally in and around our average marks will be what? 75 marks. 75 to 80 marks. But normally the questions will be what? The 10 mark as well as 50 marks. Yes or no? This is our first one clear. Now sir, the majorly our weightage with respect to our prelims. Now what is the weightage with respect to our prelims? It is majorly we call it as 32, the 34 the marks, and with respect to our mains one we will be getting approximately, it is we call it as the 75 marks we will be getting it from our mains part. Okay Alva, this is our first and foremost major aspect with respect to our why. Now is the why clear? Now should we need to read this subject as such? Now if you want to read this subject as such, now how much time should we need to give this subject? Give for this subject for both prelims as well as for mains part. Now what is the cost benefit analysis we need to give here? Hope you are getting my question. Now if it is marks, we are talking about marks. Now I said prelims consist of how many? Now prelims consist of, think that some 35 marks. Now mains consist of some 70 or 75 marks. Now total, can I say 110 marks is being asked from geography, both from our prelims as well as from our mains perspective. If that is the case, boss, if that is the case, how to crack this? How to get 110 marks? How to get this? Now for that, what should be our planning? What should be our idea? What should be our, we call it as the organization? What should be our blueprinting? What should be there? Try, and that what should be there, we call it as, now how to organize all the things comes under an aspect called as, our third aspect called as, what's the third aspect? What is the third aspect? Now the third aspect, we call it as, what is the third aspect? Thank you. What is the third aspect? We need to see. The third aspect, we call it as how to study the subject. How to study the subject? First, how to study? Now, how to study? Should we need to study in random manner, or should we need to study it in organized fashion? If it is organized, Andre, how organized? It is syllabus. Now, what is syllabus? Now, our preliminary syllabus does not talk about any organization. It says that geography of India and geography of the world. Done with the game. How to study? Now for studying this geography as such, and these are the third part of our we call it as our three-pronged strategy. How to study this? Now sir, to study this subject as such, to study this subject, we need to study it from our what? We need to study it from our organized manner. We need to study it from what manner? Organized manner. We need to study it from our organized fashion. Sir, how to study from our, or can say organized manner? Now, based on our three things. Based on our three things. Now, what is this three things we need to know before studying about geography? The first one, we call it as, we need to know about what? The syllabus, both from our prelims as well as from our mains perspective. Yes or no? First one. And the second one, we call it as, by analyzing our previous year questions, both from our prelims as well as from our mains perspective. Yes or no? Second one. And the third major important one, we call it as, we need to know the clear sources and the clear references. The clear sources as well as clear references should be clear. Now, shall we discuss one by one? Now, what is the syllabus? What is the syllabus which has been mentioned with respect to what? With respect to the first part called the syllabus. Now, I've already said, the first one we call it as, what is the syllabus which is mentioned related to prelims, related to mains? First. First one. Which all things we need to know? Online, fast. Yes. I hope it is clear. Yes. Good evening. Online, good evening. Yes. First. Now, what is the syllabus which is mentioned related to prelims? The first and foremost one we call it as, we have only a simple things we call it as geography of India and geography of the world. Now, if you want to study about geography of India or geography of the world, can I directly teach you the geography of India and geography of the world? Or should we need to know the basic aspect or the basic components? Now, which thing should I need to know? Now, first one, our prelims part, which clearly talks about geography of India And the second one we call it as what? Geography of the world. Geography of India, as well as we call it as what? Geography of the world. Now if it is geography of India and geography of the world, we need to know only two things here. Only two things here. The first one we call it as, we need to know the basics and we need to know the application parts. First one is our basics. The first is our physical geography, human geography, as well as we call it as economic geography, we call it as basics. And while studying about the basics, we will be applying that basics to what? And basics to where? The basics to the Indian examples and the basics to the world examples. And this will be our strategy. Be cautious here while studying about the prelims as well as in fact the mains also. We will be studying from basics, that till advanced level, including our current affairs related to geography. While studying this, we will be applying those basics as well as advanced to which all fields? Majorly to we call it as the India as well as to we call it as the world part. And this will be majorly our strategy from basics to advanced, basic of geography and advanced the current affairs part. Yes or no? This is our first part, we'll be studying it. Now sir, with respect to while studying about the mains syllabus, which all things we'll be studying here? Again, we'll be studying about our mains part, which also includes our three things, only three things. Now which is our only three things? It is again our three things, one which includes our physical part, one which includes the physical part of our geography, one which includes our physical part, and the second one we call it as the human aspects of geography, and the third one we call it as what? Economic. Now even example question kelidru kuda, it is the questions will be from which all things? This three. Now I said it is 4 and 2, it is 2, 2, 2. The two questions from physical, two questions from human, two questions from economic. Majority will be from this fashion, or in this manner, two from physical, human and economic. Yes or no? This will be our, we call it as, it is marks distribution or allocation with respect to what? Allocation with respect to the main syllabus of how many marks? It is 75 the marks. Yes or no? Yes. Now we'll see all the things one by one. How to crack this, we'll see one by one. This is our first one. And the second one I've already said based on our previous year questions, starting from 2013 up till 2025, both from our prelims as well as from our mains, what is the analysis? Why with respect to we call it as, it is from 2013, why only from 2013? Why? The pattern has been updated. Now in the year 2013, the pattern has been updated and our syllabus is what now? The syllabus is new year. The syllabus we call it as, the syllabus is new pattern. And other reason based on analysis from 2013 to 2025, sir, what is the highlights? Now the first highlight here is, the first highlight of this 2013 to 2025. Now the first highlight here is, the questions are not what? The questions are not at all direct. The questions are not at all direct. Now if it is not direct, sir, now where are we getting questions from both prelims as well as from mains? Where are we getting? Now the questions we are majorly getting it from the major important concept called as the conceptual clarity. From the concepts or from we call it as the static linked with current affairs. Be cautious here. The questions are being asked from a static linked with current affairs. Now, Now think that if volcanoes are in use, current affairs with static. If earthquakes are in use, static with current affairs. If cyclones are in use, static with current affairs. Now in the same manner, they are asking, it is the mix of both the static as well as current affairs, the MCQs as well as current affairs. The mains content is being asked from majorly, not from 2013, majorly from, we call it as last 5 years. From 2013 or 2019 we are getting majorly from which all topics? It is majorly from static linked with current affairs. More of conceptual clarity, more of, we call it as integrated knowledge is required. It is rather than mugging up your NCRTs. It is they are not asking from either references nor from, we call it as the NCRTs. Rather they are asking questions from where? It is questions from majorly the current affairs inspired questions, or we call it as static linked with current affairs questions. We are getting in higher number both in your prelims as well as your mains. This is the second, the throwback with respect to the PYQ analysis. And what is the third highlight, sir? The third highlight of, we call it as, it is the PYQs. It is the questions are becoming lengthier day by day. Now, it was initially it was direct, but now we are getting questions from where? We are getting questions from, we call it as lengthier statements. We are getting questions majorly from where? It is, we call it as the lengthier statements, the question are being asked. Now, don't you think for lengthier statements, the time consumption is more? So again, the marks is 2 marks, but it is taking huge amount of time. Sir, how to get experienced or how to solve this? Now for that we are including as a part of this course, we are also including it is PYQ analyzed. The PYQ analyzed, the weekly test has also been provided both from the prelims perspective as well as from your mains perspective. And the second one, and that test will be both of concepts as well as current affairs integrated. And the first one we call it as the question majority won't be, it is, or I won't be adding more of direct questions, rather will be adding what? It is the indirect, it is the static link with current affairs, the concepts will be adding as a part of your weekly current affairs every week on Saturday. It will be both your prelims as well as mains. The test will also be conducted and it will be evaluated. In case any doubt idru kuda, in case any doubt, you can contact me also. Yes or no? It is in the class. We'll discuss all. We'll take up the doubts also. We'll take up the explanation also. Discussions also. We'll see all those things. And this is majorly we call it as a part of this course. As a part of this course, it is majorly the PYQ analysis also been done. And the next one, along with those things, the third one we call it as, sir, which all sources we need to refer? Which all sources we need to refer? First, which all sources? Okay, 11th, adamele. Yes, is online. It is change in pattern. Okay. Now, which all sources? It is, you should open your mouth and you should talk. Even if it is wrong also, it doesn't matter. You should talk. Now, all the sources? It is the first and the foremost source in Rela. First and the foremost source here is, you should come to the class. My simple question here is, are the questions being asked from NCRT? But if no, why are you reading? Matte class get bartidira. Why are you coming to the class? My question is simple. If you are getting question from NCRT, then read NCRT. Are you getting questions? If not, mat yak kotidra basu. Why are you reading it? Basics. Matte class hai kya? See, there are only one alternative option. One we call it as either you need to go for self-study or class. If you are coming to class, that is our own duty, right? It is our own duty. There are only two things. Either read NCRT. Normally, we suggest NCRT for one who are self-studying. one who are self-studying, we recommend it to go for what? We recommend it to go for NCERT. See, plan accordingly. Plan accordingly, and you should know which is right and which is wrong. And you are 18 plus. And you have the voting rights also. If you have the voting rights, don't you think you can decide what is right and what is wrong for this exam? But why are you not deciding it? Are you following it is a crowd? Now, if you are following the crowd, how can you expect good results? How can you expect good results? No. But be cautious. If you are going for self-study, only then NCERTs are recommended. But we'll see. It is what is the recommended one who are attending classes also, we'll see that. And the second one, it has, I've already said, it is classes. Especially my classes are more than sufficient. And all is being recorded. It is being telecasted also. It is my source is sufficient, boss. Bandi ladre keli nana. It is both from your prelims as well as from your mains. Both from your the mains part as well as from your it is the prelims part. This will be more than sufficient. Sufficient. Yenike sir andre because it is in our classes we will be discussing based on we call it as organized manner. Organized manner by covering our we call it as the lithosphere first, atmosphere as well as hydrosphere one by one. Within that we'll be studying about the physical aspects, we'll be studying about human aspect, we'll be studying about economic aspect also. One by one we'll be studying here. And along with these things, every day, it is I will make you write at least a question in the class itself. It is class itself, it is the answer writing will also be, it is some 10 marks, initially 10 marks. And for the question, I will teach you how to write that content also. How to write that content also. The best content I can say. It is, I'll be teaching this as a part of your course also. And along with these things, I will teach you how to present better maps in your geography. How to present a better maps and how to get it is extra marks, extra half a marks. Half a mark extra. How to get half a mark extra? We'll also be studying as a part of this course. We'll be discussing as a part of, we call it as extra marks also. Okay, Alva. Majorly our first and foremost source, it is you should be attending the classes on continuous basis without a leisure also. Yes or no? Can't you attend 3 hours on daily basis from Monday to Friday? It is easy, you can do it. It is you must do it. You can do it, Allah, you must do it. This should be the first and foremost aspect with respect to our sources. First one is the source. Okay, Allah, the first source we call it as you need to attend the classes. Sir, NCERT beka sir andre, it is NCERT not required. Now sir, now with that particular period of time, what can we do? How can we be more smarter? We are Gen Z, right? Now Gen Z adre, we should be more smarter than it is traditional people. Now how can we do it? Now in that particular period of time, it is everyday solve MCQs of prelims. If you have time, rather than going for NCERTs, it is solve the questions related to a particular topic. Solve some 10 questions every day. Now if it is 10 questions every day, think about 2 months, 60 days. Now 60 days ke start karte hain. You will be solving 600 topics. More than sufficient. Now the 600 topics, where will I get, sir? Where will I get? It is, if you go to Telegram, it is, you will be getting we call it as UPSC, the PYQs. UPSC PYQs. Now the UPSC PYQs, it is not about CSC question paper. Rather, it's a group of the question papers which includes the CDS, which includes NDA, which includes the CISF, which includes the CRPF, which includes EPFO, which includes IB, Yes or no? Along with these things, it is go for solving of the state PYQs also. You will get all those things. Now specific to geography, do solve the questions. Now if you want to clear this UPSC, it is with reading of NCERT, you will never clear this exam. By clearing more, by solving more amount of MCQs. Even if you are not reading anything on a daily basis, it is mandatory that you need to solve at least some 10 to 15 questions on daily basis from different examinations. Yes or no? If you want to master UPSC CSC, you need to master all these exams. And that is the only game we have. That is the only trick we have. But do this now within 15 days or within 10 days, you will see the results. And for sure you will meet me and sir, it is giving a good results. And it is giving a better results. You can do it. But now in Maths, we are reading again and again the same content. But by reading again and again the same content, don't you think there is not much validation which is added here? Yes or no? It's my job, boss. I will do it in my class. I will do both NCERTs, I will do from current affairs, I will do from references also. It is majorly, we call it as majorly GC Leong, majorly Majid Hussain, the optional, it is the optional, the book, the reference books. I will cover A to Z what is required for exam. It's my job. Trust me, that is sufficient. But adadmele, it is on every day from day one, it is solve MCQs. Random solve martiri. It is for sure the exam only minimum 10 to 15 questions will be from the same topics. Or the same question I can say. But we won't do it. Madala now. We clearly know. We clearly know how to get failed rather than how to get cleared. Hope you are getting. It is based on your planning. It is a clear sign of your failure. You are not planning. Now whatever the planning you are doing it and you are not implementing it, whatever you are implementing it, it is not giving a result. Why? Because your planning is a failed one. It is plan. It is first thing here is do nothing but only do one thing called as MCQs. Now MCQs from all the question papers, NDA, CDS, CASF, CRPF, EPF exam, UPSCs. And second one SSC related the EPFO, the banking one, all those things. And next one the state examinations, the most recent state exams, and solve the geography related topics. Now don't you think you will get more important the questions which have been asked in different exams, and that becomes important from your exam also. But it isn't madala. But if you do it, automatically you will get a result. This is majorly from our the prelims part. And the second one, sir, what should be the strategy with respect to the mains part? What should we need to do? What should we? We need to do exactly. Yesterday we also had one examination called as it is RT examination and is exactly NDS, EPFO. We need to solve all those things rather than NCERTs. See, NCERT chikmakli ke guru. It is for the basics. One who have studied 11th standard. 11th standard, but why are you reading? Why are you reading? Is it that it is all the toppers have recommended, or is it the institution has recommended, or you have decided? Now what they call that? It is set of the history or the set of NCERT books. No discount or we'll go to the market. Mysore Bank hatra hodre Rashi account irtare o yaad sigata hogobodu. Or we also have a e-copy now. Okay, e-copy tagobodu, dull, underlining, highlighting, different colors. Different colors. Now is it mandatory or is it required? My simple question is, it is you guys analyze. The simple question here is, this exam is considered to be one of the toughest exam. Will they ask the question of NCERTs? Cheapagi? What do you think? Yes or no? NCERT question kelladare nanu NCERT tagondu NCERT na I would have scrolled. Nodi, this is important, this is important, this is important. If not, why are you reading? It is you are wasting at least 6 to 8 months of the time for NCERTs. Hope you have already started. Some 2 months have jumped. Now NCERT ottane dira. Yavadu andre yavado polity NCERT tagondirtara first. It is Indian Constitution at work. Otta irtira. Or else history, art and culture. Yes or no? It is sakkataಗಿದೆ pictures ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ. Okay, Mohenjo-daro, Harappan or Mauryas. Okay, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಓದೋಣ ಅಂತ. But be sure you won't get questions. But whatever time you are investing, that is not worth of your time. Now, if I'm investing 1 hour or 2 hours of the time, at least I need to get one question. Are you in a position to get one question? Even if you read all the NCERTs, maximum you will get 2 to 3 questions. Then what is the point in reading NCERTs? For 2 to 3 questions? No. See, I'm not against NCERTs, but that is not the UPSC cup of tea. But I'm not against NCERT. NCERTs are clearly good, but not for UPSC. As every or majority people, it is recommend NCERT is NCERT odi anta. But NCERT odi clear agangididre, it's everyone would have cleared. One have cleared 11th standard would have cleared. Why not? That is why not 11th standard would have cleared. Yes or no? That's the major challenge. The first one is, the first one, be cautious here. The first one we need to go for, it is classes, MCQs, major for prelims. For mains part, it is understand my words and take it seriously also. Okay. Second one we call it as mains. Now with respect to mains, even if you are not reading anything on daily basis, mandatorily you should write the answers on daily basis. Even if you are not reading, doesn't matter. But whatever you know, it is do right. Now it can be today's question itself. Now what is geography and the subparts of geography? You can take a question and you can write for at least 10 marks or 15 marks. But while writing the answers, it has 3 things should be in your tips. The first thing here is your handwriting. Your handwriting should be the best possible manner. It should be legible. I'm not saying it's neat. Your handwriting should be legible. Should be read by some other person. A faculty or a person who is too old. He is reading your copies. He is not in a position to understand the content. Will you get marks? Handwriting and legibility should be clear. And the second major important one, whenever you are going for geography content, it is mandatory you need to add some pictographical representation. Either it can be your Indian map or the world map, or it can be it is a simple, the globe, you need to add here. It is the pictographical representation should be the present. And the third, the last or but not the least, it is addressing all the sub part of the question should be your motto. Addressing what? Addressing all the parts of the question should be your motto. That should be a highly important one. Yes or no? These are 3 things. Or the first one we call it as classes. It is the second one means. Now we will be doing as a part of this course. As a part of this course, it has classes will be both dedicated to the prelims as well as mains. And the second one, as a part of the mains part, we will be covering each and every part of your mains. Along with the things, I will make you write. And along with the things, I will discuss what all part we need to write here and how to present, how to draw a map, how to draw India map, how to draw a world map. We will be discussing all those things. And along with the things, sir, what is the third one we need to know? What is the third one we need to know? Sir, NCERT odale bedva antandre. It is NCERT is not at all required. Sir, namak satisfaction illa. I need to mandatorily read NCERT andre. It is read only and only. Read only and only. This should be as the last resort. Only for your satisfaction. You can read only and only 2 standards books. One we call it as 11th and the 12th standard. In case if you want, you can read, but we clearly say that not required. 11th and 12th NCERT. Now 11th, under 11th we have 2 important, the geography books, and 12th also we have what? We have 2 important books. Now 11th one we call it as it is the physical geography, nothing but introduction to physical geography. And the second book we call it as the introduction to Indian geography. Introduction to India, these are 2 books. And the 12th standard we call it as, one we call it as human geography, and the second one we call it as what? Economic geography. These are 4 important books. Now not required, but if you want, this is our source. But if you want to do a PhD in geography, you can refer ಮತ್ತೆ ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಕೋತಾರೆ, books ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. It is, if you want you can do a PhD in this. Now what to do sir for PhD ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, you can go for one, we call it as GC Leong, foreign author GC Leong, and the second one we call it as Majid Hussain. We teach it for optional. If you want you can read. We teach it for optional geography. Sir ಬೇಕೇ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಯಾರು ಬೇಡ ಅಂತಾರೆ, ಇಟ್ಸ್ ಯುವರ್ ವಿಶ್. ಎಸ್ ಆರ್ ನೋ? ಒಂದು 10 ವರ್ಷ ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಇರಬೇಕು, 5 year ಪ್ಲಾನಿಂಗ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಡೂ ಇಟ್. ಇಫ್ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಅಟ್ ಲೀಸ್ಟ್ ಅ 5 year plan, 1 year on geography, 1 year on polity, 1 year in economics, 1 year history, you can do it. GC Leong as well as Majid Hussain, majorly we give it for, or we recommend, or we teach it for optional papers, but not required. But majorly it is maxes NCERTs. Okay, alva? This is our fourth one. And the fifth one, sir, all this are fine. Now what is the fifth one? Now how much time is it being dedicated for both the prelims as well as mains papers? Now how much time? Now I have already said from prelims we are getting 35 marks. From mains we call it as what? It is 75 marks. Now my strategy is clear. Now for prelims, I will be teaching. It is majorly we call it as, majorly for 60 hours. Majorly for 60 hours will be for prelims, and for mains it will be some 30 to 40 hours will be for mains. Yes or no? Now each and every the 60 hours, now each class will be having for how many hours? Now 3 hours. Now 3 hours andre for how many days? 20 days. Now 20 days. Now our course will be for Monday to Friday. That is for 5 days a week. If that is the case, how many weeks will it take? Done. In the same manner, it is 40 hours for mains. Now if it is 40 hours for mains, now each and every hour will be having the 3 hours. Now 3 into some, it is 13 classes. Now it will be in and around 39 to 40 hours. Okay, totally within 90 to 100 hours. It is 90 to 100 hours. Why I am saying a range? Because it depends on the understanding capability, alva. Now I need to get satisfied saying that okay, you guys are understanding. Now based on that, I'll raise the speed or I'll slow down. It depends on you guys. The classes does not matter here, but my goal was we need to give 100% quality with respect to any subject. It is majorly our geography, but 100% quality is assured, and within that it is 90 to 100 hours. A to Z, the prelims as well as mains course will be covered only and only by me. Okay, now this is our with respect to our time. Sir, now it is 100 marks, 100 hours. It is in and around, I said, now 110 marks. 110 marks is equal to, we call it as, approximately we call it as 100 hours for complete geography. If that is the case, don't you think we are getting 1 mark from each and every hour? Now is cost benefit ratio, is it good or bad? Now NCERT you are reading. Now sir 100 hours andre. Now each and every day you are decently reading some 10 hours antandre. It will hardly take for how many days? 10 days. Even 8 hours andru kuda some 12 days, 12 to 14 days. I think that within 15 days we will be covering the geography both from prelims as well as from mains. Now, is it good or bad? Good or bad? It is majorly our cost benefit ratio is good. Cost benefit ratio is good, and that is the reason it is every class at least you will be getting some 2 to 3 marks. Every class, it is one class you will be getting at least some 2 to 3 marks with respect to each and every class. This is our major focus. This is our major focus. I want marks. Nimage beko ilvo gottilla, but nanage marks beko. Yes or no? It is I want marks, and that's the reason. It is that the reason I teach only and only the important points which are either being asked in question or the most expected matra. Nothing but majorly I am more of capitalist, majorly demanding marks. Majorly demanding marks. Nang marks beke marks I won't even discuss. I won't even touch that topic. That is my goal and that is my aim also. This is majorly we call it as the 4th or the 5th part. And the next one with respect to answer writing also. With respect to answer writing also, I said we will be discussing based on what? 7-pronged strategy. We will be discussing based on 7-pronged strategy. 7-pronged strategy. Now, what is the 7-pronged strategy? First, yes, good, okay. And what is the 7-pronged strategy? What is the 7-pronged strategy? Now, how to write and what is the prerequisite for the mains part? Beginning. What is the prerequisite we need to have with respect to the mains one? What are the things we need to have? Now, our 7-pronged strategy, which includes the different aspects of mains, Sir, which all parts we will be discussing as a 7-pronged strategy for mains, Andre? First one, we will be discussing introduction. Now, for our mains part, we will be discussing introduction. Now, again, our introduction includes 3 important things. One is our definition. What is earthquake? We will be discussing about definition. And the second one, what is the uniqueness about the earthquake? And the recent stats or the facts or examples we will be discussing as a part of this course. First one. The second one, we call it as what are the causes of earthquakes? If it is causes, or we will talk about origin of any topic, be it any topic, we can apply for all the topics. This we call it as 7-pronged strategy. First one is our introduction, second one is our causes or origin, and the third one will be salient features of a particular topic. Either it can be earthquake, or it can be volcanoes, or it can be geography as such. Introduction of geography, the causes of geography, salient features, and followed by this, we will be discussing about the types, the positives, the negatives, the solution, or we call it as way forward. This we call it as the 7-pronged strategy of what? Writing a mains answer or the mains content. This is the 7-pronged strategy with respect to it is the mains content. Now, be it any topic, we will be covering a particular topic from 7-pronged strategies. Be it any topic. Try making cyclones. What is introduction of cyclones? The causes of cyclones or origin of cyclones, the salient features of cyclones, types of cyclones, positives of cyclones, negative, way forward. Take an example of monsoon. What is monsoon? Introduction, the causes of monsoon, the salient features of monsoon, types of monsoon, positive, negative, way forward. Yes or no, boss? Can we apply? Now, take an example of why IT is present in Bangalore. Introduction, the causes of IT in Bangalore, the salient features of IT, followed by the types of IT, BT, BPO services, positives, negative, way forward. Hope you're getting it. This we will implement on ground. This we will implement on ground as a part of this course. These are the 6 major important The 6 major important one. Yes or no? This is majorly we call it as, it is organized as well as the blueprinting. Organized as well as we call it as the blueprinting the topics. The organization as well as the blueprinting and the creativity. Okay, Alva? Yes, this is all we call it as. This is all we call it as the introduction as well as the strategy session. Introduction as well as the strategy. Now, is there any doubts from this? Now, along with these things, mandatorily every day you should bring an atlas. It is mandatorily. It is. Now, which all things should I need to bring, sir? Anta kelidre. First one, madlu you bani class ge. First thing. And second one, it is at least you can make a note of the running notes you can make. And along with those things, bring an atlas. Bring an atlas. Second one is majorly. The second one majorly. It is atlas. Yav sir togobeko atlas antandre. Majorly you can buy. It is Oxford. Be cautious here. You need to buy Oxford student atlas. Mata school atlas togobitira. You need to buy the Oxford, the school atlas. The Oxford school atlas. It is most good. Sir, ಅದು ನನಗೆ ಬೇಡ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನನಗೆ ಬೇಡ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ which atlas? The majorly you can buy any atlas which is present in the market, but majorly the preferably we call it as the Oxford atlas. Majorly be cautious, the student atlas or any atlas. The atlas done, but one idre saku, and rest it is we can browse it on the online itself. Idu madam. This is majorly we call it as the introduction as well as the geography, or introduction as well as strategy related to geography. Now, sir, after all these things, is there any doubts? Is there any doubts? Doubts ke liye patpatanta? If not, yes, we'll see all the things. Begin. Now, any doubts? ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತು ಹೋಗ್ಲಿ 100%. ಏನ್ ಡೌಟ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲ. Geography okay na, ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಿದೆ ಹೋಗ್ಲಿ, easy ಅನ್ಸಿದೆ ಹೋಗ್ಲಿ. Okay. Now, if that is the case, now we'll discuss a single theme called as geography. Now, the first chapter we call it as what? Give a heading called as chapter 1 called as. We'll discuss only one theme, chapter 1. Under the chapter 1 we call it as Introduction to Geography. The first chapter 1 we call it as the Introduction to Geography. Introduction to we call it as Geography. Now, sir, under this Introduction to Geography chapter, we will be discussing about 3 themes. We will be discussing about the 3 themes under this Introduction to Geography. Now, under this, the first focus, we call it as study about what? Study about the basics aspect of what? Basic aspect of Earth. Now, while studying about this Earth concept, we will be studying the 3 important themes. We will be studying 3 important themes. Now, the first theme, the theme 1, the theme 2, and the third one we call it as what? Theme 3. But today majorly we will discuss about theme 1. It is just for clarity. How will geography be studied? You will get a complete idea. The first theme we call it as, it is basics about what? It is the basics about the Earth. The first theme we call it as the basics about the Earth, and the second one we call it as studying about the imaginary line. Now, what is the imaginary line which has been added on the Earth? Online fast? Yes. Okay. Online, this is completely English. completely English course, but management has said that okay, you can use some 10 or 15% of Kannada, the local language, rest it is completely of English. Okay na, it is, what can I do, it is completely a guidelines. Okay alva, it is, this is our first one, imaginary line, the line, and the third one we call it as, the third theme we call it as studying about what? Studying about motions. Motions andre aa motions alla. It is movements. Motions we call it as movements. There are two types of the motions. One we call it as what? One we call it as a rotation. One we call it as a rotation, and the second one we call it as what? Revolution. Now if I am turning or on my axis, we call it as what? Rotation. If I am turning on my axis, we call it as what? Rotation. But if I am turning or if I am moving, it is against this, against a particular material, we call it as what? Revolution. If a earth, if it is moving or if it is moving on its axis, we call it as what? If a earth, if it is moving around the parent star, we call it as sun. We call it as what? Yes, we'll see all those things. Now this rotation leads to day and night, creation of day and night, whereas this revolution leads to creation of what? Seasons. We'll see the different seasons. Now what is autumn, what is spring, what is winter solstice, what is summer solstice, we'll see all those things. Day and night, what is solar day, what is day, what is night, what is seasons, we'll see all those things. Okay, Alva. This is majorly we call it as, the concept of earth, introduction to geography. Okay, now, yes, now under our earth, we'll be studying about the basic earth. Now what is the shape, what is the size, what is the structure, what is the movement, what is the revolution, it is covered with what? Second one, while studying about imaginary line, now while studying about imaginary line, we'll be discussing about our two important aspects. One we call it as what is latitudes, what is longitudes, what is international date line, what is equator, what is tropic of Cancer, what is tropic of Capricorn, what is Arctic Circle, what is Antarctic Circle. Yes or no? It is first, adukoskara my chapter. It is the chapter we call it as Introduction to Geography, or majorly we'll be studying about yadru ಬಗ್ಗೆ. It is earth. Yes or no? Yes. See, everything is planned, everything is organized, and this is majorly my allocation also. That is whatever I'll be teaching, it is my own innovation. It is the chapters also, it is based on, we call it as marks allocation also. The marks allocation, it is, we'll be studying all those parts. Yes. Now, shall we go for the first part? Now, the first part we call it as, give a heading called as the earth. Give a heading called as earth. The first one, give a heading called as, it is earth. Now, while studying about the earth, can we study the earth in a random manner? Or should we need to have a blueprint? It is blueprint. Now, what is that blueprint we need to have to study about this earth? In blueprint irbeku. First, what is the blueprint? We need to have to study about this, we call it as the earth anta nodadadre. The first one we call it as, first one understand this, we need to have a blueprint. Now, blueprint to study this, we have three important blueprints here. The first one we call it as, it is introduction about earth. Second one we call it as the salient features. And the third one we call it as what? The third one we call it as uniqueness. Yes or no? Now we'll see all the things. Now while studying about introduction, we will talk about what is the location of the earth. We will discuss about, along with location, this planet is called as what type of planet? Is it a part of our solar system? We'll see this. Now while studying about the salient features, we will discuss about what is the shape of the earth, what is the shape? Second one, what is the rotation of the earth? What is the density of the earth? Yes. Now uniqueness bandaga, why earth has life? We'll be discussing this. Now if you fill the 7 points, done with earth theme, the first thing. Now shall we see one by one? Now first one, now think that this is the sun. This is our sun. Now within our, or with respect to our solar system, we have how many planets? We have how many planets? Fast. Begne. We have how many planets? We have 8 important planets. We have 8 important planets. We have 8 important planets. Now, the first planet we call it as what? It is Mercury. The second planet we call it as Venus. The third planet we call it as Earth. The fourth planet we call it as Mars. The fourth planet we call it as what? Jupiter. The Saturn, Uranus and Neptune. Now if I want to describe about the Earth, where is Earth? It is, Earth is a, now conscious question, don't you think Earth is a part of solar system? First one. And the second one. Now second one is the Earth nearest to the sun or farther from sun. Second nearest. And the third one, now can I say the location of Earth we call it as third from our where? Sun. And it is a part of what? It is a part of solar system, it is a part of inner planets. This inner, this is what? Outer planets. Yes or no? Now next one, barkobidi kelskoli. It is kelskoli barsi. Now Earth is covered with majority. It is covered with land, or is it covered with water? Water. Now if it is covered with water, 70 to 75% it is covered with water. If that is the case, this planet is also called as what? The blue planet. Now, is the first part clear now? Now can we write this first one, introduction? Shall we try? Now go for second one. It is, or the first one we call it as the first according to our blueprint. According to our blueprint, it is first one we call it as introduction. Now while writing about introduction, we need to talk about what? First one, it is what? Earth is a part of what? Earth is a part of solar system. First one, okay now. Earth is a part of solar system. Second one. Second one, what is the location of this Earth? Is it a part of inner planets or a part of outer planets? Now is it closest to sun or farther from sun? Now adukoskara, the second one we call it as, the second one, it is third planet from the sun. Third planet from the sun. Hope you guys are getting it with blueprint. Third planet from the sun, and the second one. Now closest or farthest? The closest from the sun, and the second or the third one we call it as the third one. What is third one? It's a part of inner planet. Yes or no? Now if we want, we can add our third part called as some most popular names. Now some most popular names of Earth. It is called as, we call it as what planet? It is blue planet. Why it is called as blue? It is Our earth is made up of, the 3/4 is made up of what? Water. 3/4 is made up of water. 3/4 is made up of the water. Okay now? Yes or no? Is the first introduction clear? Now if introduction clear, shall we go for second part? Second part we call it as what? What second one? With respect to blueprint, we call it as the salient features. We call it as salient features. Now while studying about the salient features, I have already said what is the shape of the earth. What is the shape of the earth? Second one, what is the time taken up by the earth to rotate? One rotation, one revolution, how much time does it take, or will it take? The third one we call it as, it is density. Fourth one we call it as the movement. In which direction does this earth moves? We'll see all the things. Now, how is earth? What is the shape of the earth? First one? It is first one. Now, is it spherical or is it? It is geoid. Now, what is geoid? Now, geoid means, be cautious here. Geoid means it is bulged at where? Bulged at the nothing but big fat. It is, this we call it as bulged. It is like exactly like a human being. Now what thing is the middle lane? It is dumukke. Whereas head and the foot, how will it be? Flat. Hope you're getting it. It is, the poles will be in what like? It is the near to poles, it will be flat. The flat at the poles and bulged at where? Bulged at the center. Now this shape we call it as earth-like. Now what is earth-like? We call it as geoid. Earth-like, we call it as geoid. Earth-like, we call it as what? We call it as geoid shape. Yes or no? It is geoid shape. It is also called as oblate spheroid. It is earth-like. It is simple example Kerala, but they'll ask oblate spheroid. Now, what do you mean by oblate spheroid? What's oblate spheroid? It is bulged at the center. Whereas flattened at where? Flattened at the poles. This we call it as what? The shape of the earth. Be cautious here. The shape of the earth is not circular, neither it is spherical. But the shape of the earth we call it as geoid. Now what is geoid? The bulged at the center, flattened at where? Top. Flattened at the poles, north pole and south pole. We call that shape of the earth as what? Geoid. Yes or no? First one. Now second one. Now what is the movement of the earth? What is the movement of the earth? Does it move from east to west or from west to east? Eng move agatte. Or what is the rotation of the earth? Now already it is, you already know that it is ಎಂಗಿಂದ move agatte sir andre. Always and always it moves from west to east, and that is the reason sunrise originates in which direction? East. And that is always and always sun rises in the east, sunset where? West. Okay, alva. That's the easier one. It is east to west. East to west. It is majorly we call it as east. It is the origination, and the second one we call it as west. And that's the reason majorly we call it as earth rotates from west to east, west to east, west to east. Okay, now. Yes, second one. The third one, what is the time required for the to rotate one rotation? It is 24 hours. 24 hours. It is 24 hours. 24 hours. Yes or no? It is, I hope you guys are getting. It is just a blueprint. I am filling all the blueprints. 24 hours. Now, is the density of Earth, is it in solid form or in liquid form? Now we have land. Now is this land in gaseous form or in liquid form or in solid form? Solid. Now if it is solid, Andre, will the solid be having higher density or lower density? Now think that take an example of this pen and this water. Now which one will be having more density? Which one? It is pen, because same content is filled with, is packed in this pen. Whereas you do, it is floating. Now in the same manner, if the earth is solid, will it be having lesser density or higher density? Higher density. It is, earth will be having what type of density? It will be having, we call it as the higher density, and earth is the higher density in our solar system itself. Earth has higher density in our complete where? In our complete solar system. In our complete solar system. This is about our, we call it as salient features. The last one we call it as, now what's the last one? First, what's the last one? Okay. Which is the last one? Okay. The third one we call it as the uniqueness about Earth. Now, can you give some uniqueness about Earth? Now, what is uniqueness? It is the first and the foremost uniqueness here is our Earth is called as what? Our Earth is called as Goldilocks zone. Now, what do you mean by Goldilocks zone? What do you mean by Goldilocks zone? It is a planet where there is a existence of life. Goldilocks zone, in a simpler manner, we call it as a planet which has a life. We call it as what? Goldilocks zone. Now, sir, now, if I want to call a particular planet as Goldilocks zone, how can we call a particular zone as Goldilocks zone? When it is when, Andre, it is when the water exists in what form? When the water exists in liquid form, either solid or liquid, or either solid or gaseous form, but the water is existing in what form? Liquid form. Now, if water is existing in liquid form, what does it mean? It means that the climate is moderate. It means the climate is neither too extreme, neither formation of ice solid, nor formation of deserts, the gaseous form. But the water is in what form? It is liquid form. What does liquid mean? Moderate climatic conditions. Don't you think only and only in moderate climatic conditions the humanity or the life can exist? And ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ Goldilocks ಅಂತ ಕರಿಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ water should mandatorily exist in what form? Liquid. Yes or no? Yes, this is our first theme. Now, the first theme, was it easier based on our blueprinting? Based on our blueprinting, it is the 7 points. We have filled this. Location, followed by, we call it as, it is majorly we call it planet uniqueness, followed by the shape, rotation, the time, density, life. Now, if you remember this, it is done with the game, Alba. You keep on, it is completed this. Now, notice location, the solar part of solar system, third from the sun, and second one planet is called a blue planet. Shape, geoid or oblate spheroid, Earth-like. Rotation, west to east. Density, highest. Life, yes, Goldilocks zone, done with the game. Theme 1 done. Yes or no? See, ee tarane for every theme, it is before the chapter itself, before it is starting the chapter itself, I'll give you the blueprints. Now our blueprint ge sambandha pattange each and for each and every theme, I'll give you the blueprints. Some 6 to 7 points, it is done. Okay alva? This is all for today. Now is there any doubts from today's class? Now either it can be from intro, the strategy, or we call it as the theme 1. Now do you require any changes with respect to language, with respect to speed, with respect to voice? Hello, okay na? Yes, language fine. It is okay. Okay, this is all for today. Online, I hope it is clear. Yes. Okay, shall we end here? Yes or no? Now tomorrow the same time, the class will start from 4 to 7 with a break of some 10 or 15 minutes. Nimge yaವಾಗ ಬೇಕು ಕೇಳಿ. It is we can go for some 10 or 15 minutes of break in the middle. Okay alva? But for me, I don't want any break. But nimge ಕೂರಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ we'll continue. Or else we can go for a break. Some 10 or 15 minutes, it's not an issue. It is ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿ ಯಾವಾಗ ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. From tomorrow, we'll go for some 10 minutes so that you will also get refreshed and we can continue up till 7 o'clock. Okay alva? Now let's our classes be more of enjoyment rather than as a burden. Sir, class ಬರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಬರಬೇಡಿ. It is if you are not feeling it is well to come to class, it is ಬರಬೇಡಿ, ಆರಾಮ ರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ. But if you are feeling enjoy ಇದೆ, ಸರ್ ಹೋಗೋಣ ಬನ್ನಿ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ it is ಬನ್ನಿ, we'll do it something. Okay ಅಲ್ವಾ? Yes, we'll do anything, whatever the possibility, we'll do it. Okay, with enjoyment, with happiness, we'll do it. Okay alva? With this note, we'll stop it here and we'll continue the rest part in the upcoming days. And tomorrow's class will be from 4 to 7. Okay alva? Thank you. Online, thank you. It is see you all tomorrow. Okay alva?